Hey, I'm assuming everyone's here. My name is Sharang Biswas, and today we're going to be talking about role playing and the senses. So we're going to start a little slideshow I have, or actually, Tech, can you start the slideshow? Thank you. So, like I said, my name is Sharang Biswas. Just a note, this is an image from J Dragon's Wonder Home. I think it's an image that does a lovely job of evoking the senses. Ooh. So, a little bit about me. I'm a game designer. An interactive artist, and I am a writer. Have had works shown or fellowships or residencies at some of the art institutions above. I teach a lot of game design. I've taught all those places. I'm teaching at Dartmouth this summer. I've written a lot about games in various publications, and I've won some awards and been nominated for some awards. So I've done a lot with games recently. Whoop. You might recognize me from the games I've worked on. For example, I was the main writer for Holy Festival of Color by Floodgate Games. I was one of the game designers for Avatar, the Last Airbender's latest role-playing game, Avatar Legends. I've done a lot of indie role-playing game stuff on my own. I've also written for other games. Here, some interactive theater I've done. I did the Dark Crystal piece with my co-designer Nicole Leary at the Museum of the Moving Image. That was really cool. Like it was the the Henson Foundation helped us and everything. That was pretty awesome. And like I said, I've written a lot about games, different things. I've also been writing a lot of fiction recently. Most of those you can check out online for free, except the one on the right. You have to buy the book. But yeah. So I do a lot of stuff. But today we're going to talk about how games, especially role-playing games, well, mainly only role-playing games, can evoke and engage with the senses. So first off, all art has the potential to engage with the senses, right? So on the left, we have Kay Sage's Tomorrow Is Never, which I think is Kay Sage's last major piece before she died by suicide, if I remember. And I think, I mean, that's all just a fraction of the piece, a piece of the piece. That's awkward to say. It's a piece of the piece. But I think just looking at it conveys a feeling of like vivid loneliness. I know those two words don't often go together, but yes, I feel it's very vivid sort of loneliness that you see when you set that image. And it's the visuals of it that really engages you. On the right, you see the Globe's 2013 production of Midsummer Night's Dream. I just really like that screenshot a lot. But like the point there is that other forms of art can engage the senses in many different ways. But when you talk about how games have particularities, have unique affordances, especially in role-playing games, that engage with and allow you to evoke the senses in different ways. Next slide. There we go. So we're going to talk about we're going to talk about two major ways of doing this, right? There are other ways that I'm not going to discuss. So, for example, I'm not an expert on visual art. So I'm not going to touch on like visual art or like physical components and things like that very much. I'll be talking mainly about text, how role-playing games use text, and how role-playing games use verbs. Wow, uploading this slide has changed my typefaces and has changed the size of my letter forms. I did not realize that would happen. No worries. Yay, StreamYard. So, two ways, text and verbs. So we're going to start with text. By the way, that's a screenshot of Bluebeard's Bride, because Bluebeard's Bride also engages the senses in a lot of ways using the text. Check it out. So first off, using text to evoke the senses has long been thought of as a domain of like poetry and prose, right? But as Huizinga argues in Homo Ludens, quote, play was so innate in poetry and every form of poetic utterance so intimately bound up with the structure of play that the bond between them was seen to be indissoluble. It's a weird word to say, indissoluble, right? So here, I want to talk about this idea that poetry and games, just like poetry and prose, have like fuzzy lines. You can often be like, this is poetry, this is a game. But sometimes you're like, wait a minute, these things are merging, and what are we talking about, right? So this is a piece by Carmen Maria Machado's The Husband Stitch. It appeared in Granta, which is a very well-regarded literary magazine. And it's a prose piece, the story, but in the middle of the story, statements like this appear. Quote, if you read the story out loud, the sounds of the clearing can be best reproduced by taking a deep breath and holding it for a long moment. Then release the air all at once, permitting your chest to collapse like a block tower knocked to the ground. Do this again and again, shortening the time between the held breath and then release. End quote. Emphasis is mine. So notice that it is a story. It's about this like woman, and I recommend you all read the story. You can access it online, but it's punctuated by these moments of the author slash narrator literally telling the reader how to read the story and performing these odd actions, right? So here we think about giving instructions to the reader as the domain of games, right? But here we're blurring the lines. Also note I highlighted or emphasized the like very visual moment, right? Permit your chest to collapse like a block tower knocked to the ground. That evokes something very particular in the senses, and if you read the story, you will understand more of what they're trying to evoke, right? Or look at this other slides. Look at this other example. This is a game that I designed called You Will Be Liquid, and the point of this was to try and be poetic. Hopefully, I succeeded. You'll find out. But it's a solo role-playing game, and there's this bit where you're wandering in a gay club. And here, a boy's jade eyes glitter. He studies the menu like a prospector and unearths a heavy herbal drink. He speaks slowly, and his smile is solid and dependable. What features of this boy remind you of Leif? Are you flirty or friendly, right? So here I try and use poetic language, but one of the things about this game, by the way, the game structure was designed by Adam Vass. I just designed this like scenario, and he did the illustration as well. This game can be consumed without actually answering the questions or making the decisions, right? You can just go through this because the game is literally just scenes like this. You can go through it, read it, and be like, oh, that was lovely, right? In fact, I know people who've done that, right? So here I call this a game. This like the ontology of this itself identifies a game, but it can be read as a piece of lyrical prose, right? And so the borders of poetry and poetic language and games can sometimes collapse, and we can leverage this collapse. We can leverage techniques from each to inform the other. So I'm going to show you some examples of games that use text, that use language in specific ways to evoke the senses, and we can hopefully learn from these in our own design practice, right? So this is from Daniel Solis's Pilgrims of the Flying Temple. It's a very lovely, quiet, maybe not calm, but quiet, positive, uplifting sort of game about monks who are going around helping people in the world, like child monks who can fly around and do shenanigans, right? But there's this quote here, quote, only monks of the flying temple and the pilgrims they train can fly unaided. They know the subtle emotional attachments that give gravity its comforting power over the human heart. Right? So here, this piece, Daniel Solis uses very lyrical language to conjure a very particular tone, right? He uses a technique that's often called pathetic fallacy, which is ascribing human qualities to other sorts of things. Sometimes personification, those are kind of different. To uses lyrical language to evoke this like tone, this like calmness, this like lovely sort of feeling. And here, because he needn't have said that, right? He's the only monk the flying temple and the pilgrims they train can fly unaided. Period. That's probably enough, but the following sentence is useful because it creates a tone for the game. Okay, so that's one example of using lyrical language to create this sort of like atmosphere. This is from the 4th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So this is, quote, the pacts are complete, the rites have been concluded, the signs are drawn in blood, and the seals are broken. Your destiny beckons. This is part of the description of one of the character classes. If you want to try and guess which character class it is in the Twitch chat, feel free. I will reveal the answer in a sec. But here, the authors use very specific sensory and physical detail to evoke an image, right? Like this character class is like the signs are drawn in blood. seals are broken, rights have been concluded, pact is complete, right? These are very specific details. And I mean, what often differentiates weak writing from very resonant writing is this inclusion of specific sensory detail, right? So in game writing, you can do the same thing. You can include these specific details to evoke, to conjure up images in the minds of the reader slash GM slash player, right? And that can be very helpful in evoking the senses. I'm going to give the answer now. If you've been trying to guess, the answer is the warlock in the 4th edition book. And you can look at this example, which is kind of different, right? So this is John Harper's Ghost Echo. You might know John Harper from, Blades in the Dark. Ghost Echo doesn't use, like the last two examples use like these lyrical long sentences, interesting constructions. Ghost Echo, but this is the first page. It's a 2-page game, and this is the first page. The second page looks very similar to this, right? It's like crew, coil, demon, hull, grip, vixen, others, venom, mild, white, switch, the wraiths, dogs, vipers, right? So here, Harper uses very short, sharp sounding words, very like monosyllabic, most of them, things, lots of plosive consonants, lots of sibilants to create this cyberpunk feel, right? These words kind of like spike out at you from the page. They're kind of like electric, and they kind of like plunge you into this gritty, sharp world of Ghost Echo, right? So here, even though we don't have these like long, lush sentences, the word choice, the sounds, the rhythms that John Harper has chosen here very much engage the senses to conjure up the setting and the style of play. There's going to be a dangerous sort of world. There's going to be a cyberpunk sort of world. There's going to be like a world where lives are short and stab wounds are common, possibly, right? So again, this sort of poetic use of language, of use of text, helps evoke the senses. So think about these when doing your own game design. But we can also think of verbs. Again, foiled by StreamYard's uploading, and my lovely typeface got changed. So this is an image from Nina Essendrop's White Death, which is a LARP that is played completely without words. I mean, there are words during the workshop. When you play the game, there are no words. It's a very sensorial LARP. I highly recommend people look it up or try and play it. I ran it for my MFA class recently, and they fell madly in love with it. So verbs. Obviously, all art forms ask you to engage in verbs, right? You are listening, you are watching, you are reading, right? However, I argue that most traditional kinds of art forms, traditional is a wrong word, most kinds of art form that we think of, like film, like media, like theater, like music, ask you to do mainly one kind of verb. You're watching the film the whole time. You're reading the book, right? Obviously, that's a bit simplistic, but for the most part, in general. Games, however, different games ask you to do different kinds of verbs at different times and different quantities and different ways, right? You can be jumping and catching balls, you can be rolling dice, but also the verbs you engage in games are used to represent other things very often, right? When you're watching a movie, you're just watching a movie, right? When you're rolling a die in a role-playing game, you might be summoning a demon. You might be trying to convince the man of the house to not kick you out and leave you destitute. You might be swinging a sword, right? So in games, the actions, the verbs you are partaking in are there as stand-ins for other verbs. They're meant to carry meaning extrinsic of the verb that you are actually engaging in, right? I think that's one of the unique aspects of games and play. Now, some games do some really interesting straddling between this idea of verbs and text, right? So Epidiah Ravakal's Swords Without Master and Jason Cordova's The Between both, as part of the rules, asks you to use literary techniques. Like, think about symbolism and images, narrate a scene using that, reuse these motifs. Both these games do it in a very interesting way to make this, like, especially in The Between, to create this literary sensibility, right? The Swords That Master is trying to evoke epic fantasy myths, and the between is trying to evoke Victorian penny dreadful literature, right? So both these games ask you to engage in textual, in literary techniques explicitly in order to create a link between the game and this like meta commentary of the fact that you are playing a game, right? So between the diegesis of the game and the, I like saying exegesis, even though that's not really a word, I will make it a word. So the between and the sort of master do this interesting thing with verbs and with text. But let's talk outside of the idea of text. We've moved on from that. I talk about other kinds of verbs, right? This is me at New World Magic Scholar, which is a lot about Wizard University, that whose shirt I'm wearing right now. And here, this is me dancing. I'm like dancing while narrating Indian epic mythology or something. But these verbs can convey a lot of meaning. And this can be as simple as dice, right? Because rolling a die has sensory effects. Naomi Clark, who's the head of the NYU Game Center, once told me that at a conference, Janet Murray told her, quote, dice are delicious, right? Taking a large handful of dice and rolling them, selecting a specific die, building a dice pool like in games like Agon, for example. Agon, I always get that wrong. My ancient Greek is not very good. Can have lots of different like sensory effects, can be very satisfying, like roll a ton of dice, right? In fact, these dice that I have pictured here are from a company called Ice Cream Dice, right? Another layer of like dice are delicious, right? Getting a natural 20 in certain games can feel very exhilarating, right? So the verbs, the act of rolling dice, which is sometimes the most common verb we think about when thinking of role-playing games, can itself be very laden with meaning, right? But I also want to show this picture from Sagrada by Floodgate Games to show that the visuals of the dice, which I said I wouldn't talk about too much, but just briefly because I love this game, the visuals of the dice can also be really, really important, right? This is a game about making stained glass windows, and you literally use translucent, brightly colored dice to make these stained glass windows, right? Which is really cool. I, however, didn't show you a picture of dice to begin with. I showed you a picture of other verbs, i.e. me dance. I just really like this image a lot, so you get to watch me do this. So we can talk about some games that use different kinds of verbs to evoke, to create sensory experiences, right? So Alice is Missing, which is a role-playing game played entirely over texting, either like phone texting or Discord or whatever. It's really cool. Alice is Missing does a thing where the game is a very specific length. It's like 2-ish hours usually, including setup and stuff. But it has a soundtrack that you play, and the soundtrack marks where you are in the game as well. There's a timer and the music, and the Spencer Stark, the designer, has very carefully curated music to evoke the tone and theme of the scene you're in, right? So this game, the verb here is kind of outside the diegesis, right? So it's not the music isn't diegetic, right? It's not within the fiction, but the game asks you listen to this music while playing it, and by doing that, by making you engage in this verb, it makes it's directly engaging one of your senses, the sense of hearing. But by doing that, it creates tone and meaning that is not just through the actions you're doing while playing, right? So it's really an interesting example of using other kinds of verbs in play. But what if the verbs are then used within the play itself, right? So Jion Shim has a series of games where she like literally mails you things, and you like do all these cool, you make crafty objects and stuff. This is a little bit from one of the games I wrote for called The Shape of Shadows, where you play like a wizard. And when you receive this, the game says, look and count how many owls can you see, right? And once you've seen this number of owls, move forward, right? And that's literally what's happening within the game, right? I'm not gonna give you spoilers, but in the game, the character is looking, is searching, right? And so you, by literally looking at this and trying to find the owl, are kind of mirroring what the character is doing, right? So Jian has literally given you a sensory thing to engage with as part of the game. And I feel that I'm going to use the dirty word immersive. A lot of designers are like, oh, immersive, to use this word, but it can be useful. I would say lots of scholars say it's a useful word. Maybe designers don't. I don't know. I do know. Anyway, using these sensory sort of tricks, Jian, it literally puts you within the world of the game, right? Plunges you into the game and engages your senses more fully than just the text that, excuse me, that you are reading and or writing. I'm looking at the time. Okay, we're good at time. Alex Roberts' Starcrossed, which came out right before she got her Diana Jones Award, I think, is another thing that uses your physicality and your sense of touch in this case to really steep you within the emotions of the game. In Starcrossed, it's a two-player game where you play as two people who really, really want to get together romantically, but really, really shouldn't, right? And you can pick any kind of scenario. There are all these examples in the game. You can be like a fire elemental and a water elemental, or like a mermaid and a harpy, or like two nuns in a convent, right? Like you really want to get together for some reason for this like incredible attraction you have, but you can't for external reasons, right? But you play this game. This game is inspired by Dread, the RPG Dread, not the emotion Dread, though some of the emotion Dread I'm sure also goes in there. But you build this Jenga tower, this tumbling blocks tower, because I think Jenga's a specific brand, this tumbling blocks tower, and every time you act, you have to pull out a block, right? And if the tower tumbles prematurely, oh no, your romance is doomed, right? So you very literally have very ginger feelings as you're trying to carefully, meticulously pull these blocks and place them, which is kind of like, oh no, your romance, you're dancing around each other. Should you confess? Should you not? How do you speak? What if senpai doesn't notice me, right? All these kinds of things. And I think that the literality of doing it with the tumbling blocks tower translates really, really effectively into the game world. Like the senses that are being inflamed by the Jenga tower, like, oh no, don't fall, can also, I don't know, inflame the passions in the game, right? I play this with a number of people, including my ex-husband, my ex-husband's boyfriend, and we've always been like, oh no, what's gonna happen? It's a lovely, it's a very, very intelligent way of using physical senses to convey game concepts. This is a game that's my face, as you can see. That's before the pandemic when I had short hair. So this is a game I made with my co-designer Max Seidman, who is currently a game designer at Dartmouth at Tilt Factor Lab and Resonim. And we made this game. It's a performative, sort of interactive theater-ish sort of game where you play wizard students, right? But when we made this game, we designed the system of magic according to principles of modern linguistics. And we wrote like a little textbook which used principles of modern linguistics to evoke a sense of magic. But this game literally asks the players to like listen, right? Because I say all these magical phrases and utterances, and they have to listen, and they actually have to hear, like, what am I saying? And I have to scribble on the blackboard, that blackboard, that literal things I wrote for the class, and then I erased stuff that they had written to solve puzzles. It's not just for set dressing. And this game asks you, like, in order to play the game, you must use various sensory inputs, right? And so I like to use as an example of, like, game designers can and should, if they choose, design for the other senses, right? Like I'm designing another audio-based game in the summer where you eat a charcuterie plate, while, like, a literal charcuterie plate, while listening to someone talk about things, and you're like doing alchemy and creating the perfect boyfriend inside your body, right? I'm trying to use these different ideas of sound and taste, things like that, to see what happens to storytelling when your other senses are providing input in ways you might not be used to in games, right? Similarly, and as the final example, I have a game called Verger. It came out a couple of years ago. It's on my HIO. There's a link later. Where it's a solo game, just like the one I shared with you before. You Will Be Liquid. But you play this. It's a game about witchcraft and revenge. But it's a game you play while alone in a kitchen, and you play it while preparing a salad. Right. So the instructions have like, here are ingredients. They're very general ingredients, like leaves. It doesn't say like which kind. If you hate arugula, I love arugula, don't eat it. But it says leaves, oil, spices, something like that, and it gives you implements, and it gives you very specific instructions, like a cookbook. And it says, wash the herbs, hold them to your nose, inhale their scent. Right? It tells you to literally like inhale it, and then it says things like, let your senses inspire a memory of your childhood. Right? So the game asks you to very deliberately engage your senses with the objects you have in front of you, with the food products you have in front of you, and asks you to create stories that your senses inspire. That you're cutting the vegetables, you're tearing the leaves of the herbs, you're pouring very deliberately the oil. And what do those actions, those physicalities, you can hear the oil, you can feel the herbs, you can smell them as they bruise, right? What do those do to the storytelling? And I specifically ask you, try and see what they do. I say, let your sense inspire a memory of your childhood, right? So there again, I'm trying to inflame the senses in order to see what does this do to storytelling. And you can find this on my HIO. It was nominated for a couple of awards. No, I think it won an award. It did. It won an IGDN award. So check that out. So I think those are my final examples. So what can we do as game designers to think about how to engage the senses, right? That's a screenshot from a game I made with my co-designer Nico Leary about hacking and dance. That's a computer virus who is like, ooh, right there. Okay. So what can you do when designing a game? So first, what is the game about? What senses can I evoke, right? First off, what is the game I'm making? What are the senses associated with that? Two, again, this is the problem of uploading to StreamYards. Where can I do that with language? Can I use lyrical language? Can I use different literary techniques? Can I use onomatopoeia and the various sounds of words? Can I even use layout design, which again is not my forte, but can I use layout design and the arrangement of words to evoke something? Which verbs will create my atmosphere? So like in Alice is Missing, you can listen to specific kinds of music. What else can you do? I once played a game of Golden Sky Stories at Dreamation, which is a convention in New Jersey, where the GM brought jam cookies for us to eat before we played the game, because the game is all about like sunlit skies in Japan, and you are shape-shifting animals helping children do lovely things, right? And this idea of using these jam cookies just evoked that tone of like childhood and joy and stuff. And then, I'm so irritated by this layout. Oh, computers, why'd you do this? And then finally, which verbs simulate the actions the game represents, right? Like in Jian Shim's game, where you're literally looking for the bird in that convoluted image, or like in Verger, where you are actually like cutting and preparing food. Which verbs can you ask your players to engage in that helps convey tone? And this can happen in more quote traditional end quote kind of games, right? Games are like dice heavy. Games are about like heroes or adventurers fighting in wildernesses against like despicable monsters. You can add things to those games that you can add rich, like a lot of games have like ritual language. A lot of games have like other things. What if you make a game where you're like, okay, roll the dice and make sure you have chocolate in front of you, and every time you get a critical hit, you're allowed to eat chocolate or something, right? Obviously that's a simplistic example, but you can think about adding these like sensory inputs in various kinds of games, right? And I think we should do that more to see where our art form of game design can go. I want to give two examples. Sorry, these are things that I made, but these I think use senses really well. The first is a game called Feast. It is the first game I made that made me think about this. It won the Indicate Award a few years back. It won an IGN Award. It was shown in a couple of galleries. It's a game where you are playing, where you create these characters. You bring specific foods. You create these characters, and then you play alien parasites that are eating those characters, and you eat the people's personalities by eating the food that is on the table in front of you. And then Honey on Hot, that's independently published. That's on HIO. Honey and Hot Wax is an anthology I co-edited with Lucian Khan. There are 10 different designers there. It is published by Pelgrane Press. It is a collection of games that are all themed on sex and sexuality. And many of them do really interesting things with physical senses. Some of the games are like they discuss various things about sex, like, oh, no, discussions with your parents about talking about sex, and oh no, how awkward that is. And some of the games ask you to perform sex acts with players you're playing with. The book has a whole chapter on like calibration and consent and things, and then says, try if you want, if you have someone you want to play with, try these games. They ask you to engage in sex acts with people you're playing with, right? And there, your senses are very much aroused. Sorry, that was a pun. Not sorry at all. Are very much aroused. And what does that do to your experience of narrative, to experience of other players, to experience of game and story itself? So I recommend checking those two out. I made them both, so awesome. Finally, that is me. My name is Sharang Biswas. That is both my Twitter and my Instagram handle, though I use Instagram a lot less, but I have it. So that's my website, which hasn't been updated in 2 years because of COVID, but I'm updating it on Monday with fellow designer Yansu Davis and Janaya Kemper. We have a party where we're updating our portfolio. So check it on Tuesday. You'll see new stuff there. And then that's my HIO, astrolingus.h.io. You can buy some of the games I've made there. Some of them are one-offs or performances. Some of them are for other people, so they own them, all that kind of stuff. But you can see some of the stuff I've made, especially like sensory ones. There are others there that I didn't talk about today that are also sensory, sort of. There's one where you play by taking your clothes off in front of each other, and then drawing on each other and stuff. So yeah, that is me. I'm Sharang Biswas. Thank you for the gift of your attention. I hope I didn't speak too quickly. I'm open for questions. I think I have like 10-ish minutes, I think, before like we're going to start wrapping up. 20 minutes. Oh, perfect. Okay. I was worried we'd wrap up 10 minutes before the hour. So perfect. So I have one question already that Nikki, our Twitch moderator, has kindly sent me from the Twitch. I'm not looking at the Twitch right now. I'm looking at at StreamYards. How can game designers practice using this kind of sensory language? I mean, you answered the question kind of there, right? By saying practice, like literally just practice, right? Make games, write poetry, write fiction. Like I'm a writer, so I have the luxury of doing that as one of my jobs. But I have a folder. I have a file in my notes app, which is just called random writing. And when like random writing ideas hit me, I just like write it down. I might spend 20 minutes writing a paragraph, and then who knows what happens to it? Maybe it gets put into another story. Maybe it becomes a whole story. Maybe it's just practice. Who knows, right? But like practicing writing, practicing looking at writing that you enjoy and seeing what it does is very powerful. Reading poetry is incredibly powerful. I didn't used to be a poetry person. I used to tell myself I'm not a poetry person, right? But once you start paying attention to poetry, you become a poetry person, right? So read poetry, ask people for examples. If you're interested in like science fiction, fantasy stuff, read speculative poetry, right? That might appeal to you more because of the genre. So look at Uncanny Magazine or Fantasy Magazine or Strange Horizons Magazine. They all publish free speculative poetry online. Some of my favorite pieces are from there. Read poetry, write, pay attention to language that you see in games and books and things, and practice. Like write your own games, write weird journal things, write silly things, like imagine yourself as astronaut, write what you see, right? Things like that. I hope that helps. Any other questions? Do you have stories of games that were made deeper or stranger or better by having your senses immersed? I mean, I could cheat and say my games, the ones I mentioned, but like the Golden Sky stories is one that I think, eating those jam cookies definitely was like helpful. It really put us in the mindset. I have run Bluebeard's Bride 16 times in various cons and sometimes at home. When I run Bluebeard's Bride, I run it very theatrically. Like I put lighting and I dress up and I have makeup and I speak like this the entire time. And I feel like putting out that kind of energy and that has given me back that kind of energy from the players. They get really into that. That's a really good one. Obviously, all sorts of LARPs do this kind of thing, right? Like Janaea Kemper, I think this week, maybe today, gave a talk or is giving a talk on costuming in LARPs, right? And how like putting on even small things can be really powerful and in like putting you into character. I remember when I used to do theater in college, our costume people used to be like, make sure you get your shoes first, because being in the shoes of your character is how you move, like how you walk, right? So costuming in LARP, that's true all the time. Similarly in LARP, like set decor and set dressing can be really, really powerful. Just having a wand to wave in a Magic University LARP can be like really cool. If you think of other tabletop role playing, I've played a lot of tabletop role playing games in my life. I mean, there's some games. There's Troy's Ken Peterson's My Girl Sparrow, which is a game about sex and relationships, but you like have to like grasp hands and look into each other's eyes while narrating to each other. That's kind of very intimate, and those sensory things can be really, really powerful. But and I've also had even games that don't ask for that, like Dungeons and Dragons. I've had DMs that have made like moments that are like, okay, senses. I played a game where we were in like a library and these like magic books were attacking us, but they ate words, and every time we as players said things, the books became stronger. So we had to like mime our actions, and that was really, one, it was just wild and fun, but two, it felt really cool because like our characters cannot say words, so our players cannot say words. So that was a cool addition someone made for a game that doesn't normally ask you to engage in these other kinds of verbs, but in a very interesting way. This was also way back when. Ooh, I'm old. Ooh. Awesome. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Keep them coming. I can speak a lot. We have 15 more minutes. Otherwise, you can just keep looking at my grinning face. That's not a grin. That's a grin. More questions, more questions. Did anyone get the Warlock? Question: do you find that emotions run higher in more immersive spaces? And that's an unusual question because one can define an immersive space as one where emotions run high, right? Like, what is an immersive space? It is one where emotions are running high, right? So, interesting question. But maybe you mean in a space that has a lot of like set design and lighting and all that kind of like physical sort of emotion. Do emotions run higher? I mean, we like to say yes, right? We like to say absolutely, but that's not always true. Just like, art is experienced differently by different people, right? I might be like, oh my god, this poem is so moving and amazing, and you're like, right? So I will say it is a strong tool to help emotions run higher, right? It may not work for everyone, but it's absolutely a strong tool. Like Nina, the game I talk about, White Death, right? Nina Espenop's game is very like spotlight. It's very dark. You have like white objects everywhere. Everyone's wearing somber clothing, and that really does thrust you into this weird abstract symbolic world, right? So I would say yes, using these techniques for spatial design can absolutely help. Is it an absolute guarantee? No. The rest of the game can be, pardon my cursing, shite. And then no amount of immersion will make the game good, right? So again, using term immersion loosely. Awesome. Thank you for that question. Have you ever experienced players resisting this kind of play? Follow up, going out of their comfort zones. Resisting this kind of play. I mean, I've definitely had players tap out of games, right? They're like, "Oh, I'm gonna walk out X card," right? Which is totally fine, right? I've had people use the X card not against me. That's a horrible thing. They use the X card in a game that I'm running, being like, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna move on, right? Have I seen players being like, no, I hate this and everyone else should hate it. I don't think so, right? I think when we make the social contract to join a game, the social contract is like, other people can enjoy this even if I don't. Right? So I've never seen someone be like, stop it, this is terrible. But that could also be because I play with cool people and don't play with terrible people. So, well, that's not true. I have played with terrible people before. I just didn't know they were terrible before I played with them. Yeah, that I think that yeah, yeah, I think that's the answer to that question. Oh, and that was a follow up. Awesome. Keep them coming. We have 10 more minutes. I get a 10-minute warning, but that means we have 10 more minutes for questions. This talk was initially much longer, and I worried it would be too long. I'm like, oh no, cut, because I tend to go long, so I cut a lot, and then I realized that was too short. Question: what was a time when sensory immersion went very badly in a game you played, and what was an incredibly awesome time when it was phenomenal? I cannot remember a time when it went very badly. I will say that after I run Bluebeard's Bride, I run Bluebeard's Bride very, very hardcore, right? And if you don't know, Bluebeard's Bride is a game of feminist horror that really goes into themes of domestic violence, partner abuse, things like that, sexual assault, things like that. After I run the game, which asks the GM to take on a very misogynistic persona, I always have to go and like sit quietly for a while. Especially at cons where there's a lot of sensory overload. Haha. I often go to my hotel room and like sit for a bit, calm myself down, and then go down and drink chocolatey, boozy drinks at the bar after that. I'm not saying that goes badly, but that is something self-care I need to do after I'm doing it right. It was an incredibly awesome time and it was phenomenal. Let's see. Well, this is less about the sensory thing, more about the role playing. I played a game of Tomb Priestesses of the Nameless Dead by Jay Davis, and I didn't plan this, but actually no, it is about sensory stuff, because one of the things the game does is it has people play the nameless dead, these ghosts that wear these shrouds and walk around in the play space and whisper evil things, encourage you to do evil things, and absolutely them doing that turned my character, who I was like, oh yeah, it's a stern nun. We're all playing nuns, right? Nun-like things. But them whispering into my ear turned my nun like evil. Like I ended up plotting to overthrow the archpriestess, and I convinced her to take her own life, and I convinced her it was for the good of all of us. And I remember she looked at me and she's like, I trusted you. And I'm like, keep trusting me. Take this, go and do this thing I'm asking you to do, which is kill yourself, right? And I remember that when I said that thing, I literally remember my stomach twisting, like flight or fright response, right? Smooth muscle contraction or whatever that happens in the intestines, or smooth muscle relaxation. I don't actually remember anymore from my college biology. But I remember, and that I felt like, oh my God, I'm a horrible, evil woman, right? And that was literally caused because these like nameless dead were floating around whispering evilly into our ears. So absolutely, the like act of like this whispery, hideous voice saying nasty things to me contributed to that really awesome sense of like immersion and like character. I'm gonna say growth, even though it's growth in a bad way, but the character did grow in a different way. So yeah. We have 8 minutes left. Any other questions? I can keep them coming. Oh, you can keep them coming. I can keep on answering. I can make Jeopardy. When my undergrads don't answer, when I tell them, what did you find interesting in the reading, I make the Jeopardy music. And then they get really awkward and then they say something. And I'm like, it worked. So I could do that now, but I won't, because you're not undergrads. I'm not teaching you a course. Anything else? I can also just keep waffling and talking a lot because that's something I do. I literally cut out 3 different examples from the talk, being like, it will be too long. When I practice it, I'm like, it was too long. I guess I should have kept them in. Yeah. Okay, well, let's put up the slide again, my last slide, to just reiterate that this is my contact deets. If you would like to get in touch with me, I'm very much on Twitter. Like I'm always on Twitter. It's bad. Check out my Instagram. Follow me. I don't know. Curators follow Instagrams. If you're a curator, check out my Instagram. My website, again, it'll be updated on Monday. So check it out on Tuesday. And then that's my itch page where I have a lot of work that I have made. Thank you again for the time to pay attention to me. Thank you for your questions and comments and things like that. I hope this talk, I find cons very inspiring. And even if it's a digital con, I hope you're finding Big Bad Con, which is one of my favorite cons, inspiring and makes you think. And I hope this talk made you think about how to work on games on your own. And by the way, I always cite the images, right? This is an image from Strange Lust, Strange Love, which is an anthology of sexy interactive fiction that is on Strange Horizons. There's one story left to be published. It's going to come in the next month or so. They're all free to read. Check them out. We have some terrific designers and writers on that. But yeah, I like citing everything that's on there. I was the co-editor of that, by the way. So yeah, thank you again. You're all amazing. I hope you have a lovely rest of your con. If I know you personally and you're watching this, I can't tell. You're awesome. Thank you for supporting me. If I don't know you, I'm reasonably certain you're awesome. So yeah, lovely. Have a excellent rest of your Saturday. I will see you later. Maybe, possibly.